My name is Daphne, and I'll never forget the night my sister smirked across the dinner table and said, "That's why Mom and Dad don't love you." Everyone laughed. I didn't. Before I continue, please subscribe to show karma you're on the right side. Anyways, it was one of those family dinners that was supposed to feel warm and celebratory. The table was full of food, the smell of roasted chicken and garlic bread filling the air, wine glasses clinking as my parents beamed at my sister, Veronica, while she shared yet another story about her latest accomplishment. She always had something to parade, a promotion at work, a vacation abroad, some compliment she'd received from a stranger. And as usual, my parents listened with rapt attention, smiling like their entire world revolved around her. I tried to join the conversation, mentioning something small about a project I had finished at work, something I had worked late nights and weekends to complete. My father nodded absently, already turning back toward Veronica. My mother gave me a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then Veronica leaned back in her chair, smirked, and said those words. "That's why Mom and Dad don't love you." The table went silent for a heartbeat, like everyone was waiting for someone to object. But then the laughter started. My father chuckled. My mother covered her mouth as though she was embarrassed to laugh, but her shoulders shook anyway. Even my cousins laughed nervously, unsure if they should but doing it anyway. The sound was deafening. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth, my face burning. The words carved into me like knives. I wanted to believe they were just a cruel joke, but the way my parents didn't deny it made me wonder if it wasn't a joke at all. I searched their faces for something, anything, defense, correction, maybe even a simple, "That's not true." But all I saw was amusement, relief even, that Veronica had said aloud what they never had to. I laughed too, a brittle sound that didn't belong to me. I pretended to brush it off, pretending it didn't cut, pretending it wasn't the most humiliating moment of my life. Inside, though, I felt something shatter. Years of quiet hurts and overlooked moments collapsed under the weight of that sentence. For the rest of the night, I barely spoke. I moved food around my plate, nodded at conversations, and prayed no one would look at me long enough to notice the tears threatening to spill. My sister kept her smirk, basking in the glow of being the one who mattered. My parents never corrected her. They never said, "Of course we love you too, Daphne." They didn't say anything at all. When I finally slipped away, hiding in the bathroom for a few minutes, just to breathe, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face was red, my eyes wet, but behind the tears I felt something else, a realization. That was the night I knew I would never get what I craved from them. Love, respect, recognition. None of it was ever coming. And if they couldn't see my worth, I would have to find a way to see it myself. From the outside, my family looked like the kind you'd see on the front of a holiday card. Every December, we'd dress in matching colors, my mother fussing over Veronica's hair while I stood awkwardly to the side until it was my turn to be positioned. My father would set up the camera on its tripod, and when the shutter clicked, we all smiled as though nothing in the world was wrong. Those pictures were sent out to friends, relatives, even neighbors, who would gush about how lucky my parents were to have such a beautiful, happy family. The illusion didn't stop there. At block parties, we were the family people admired. My mom baked perfect cookies, my dad grilled burgers with a practiced grin. Veronica, slim and confident, charmed everyone with her laughter, her stories, her ease. And me? I was there too, standing just behind, holding a plate or clearing dishes, playing the role of background character in my own home. Neighbors would pat my shoulder politely, then turn back to my sister. "You must be so proud of her," they'd tell my parents. Proud of Veronica, of course. Behind closed doors, though, the truth was nothing like the glossy image we projected. The house was filled with subtle cuts, whispered comparisons, and favoritism so sharp it didn't need to be spoken outright. Veronica always had the bigger slice of cake, the better seat at the table, the louder applause for the smallest accomplishments. When she brought home a report card with B's, my parents celebrated her hard work. When I came home with A's, the reaction was a shrug. "That's expected of you," they'd say, already turning back to her. It wasn't just school. It was everything. Veronica's new clothes were praised as stylish. Mine were fine. Veronica's hobbies were talents. Mine were phases. If she wanted something, a ride, money, attention, it was granted without hesitation. If I asked, I was told to wait, to understand, to be patient. Over time, I stopped asking at all. What made it worse was how carefully my parents hid it. To outsiders, we were picture perfect. They never let their favoritism show when relatives were around. Instead, they used me as part of the performance, forcing me into pictures where I stood just far enough from Veronica that no one could miss the contrast. When the compliments rolled in, "Look how stunning your girls are," my parents always looked at her. Always her. It's strange how quickly you learn to live in the shadows. I thought if I tried harder, if I smiled wider, maybe I'd be let into the spotlight. But the truth was simple. They didn't want me in it. The illusion only worked if Veronica shined brightest, and that meant keeping me dim. Those holiday cards, those posed portraits, those Sunday smiles, they were never for me. They were for everyone else, to convince the world we were perfect. And for years, I went along with it, letting myself be cropped into their picture even when I knew I didn't belong. Veronica was always the chosen one. From the moment we were kids, it was obvious the world revolved around her. She had the kind of face people stopped to compliment in grocery store aisles, the kind of smile that made relatives gush. "She's going to be a heartbreaker one day." My mother would beam with pride, my father would puff up his chest, and I would be left standing next to her, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice me. Most of the time, they didn't. At school, teachers loved her. She wasn't the best student, but she was charming, quick with jokes, the kind of girl who could talk her way out of trouble. When she forgot her homework, it was brushed off with a laugh. When I turned mine in early, it was expected, not celebrated. She was bright. I was responsible. They used different words, but I knew what they meant. Every family gathering played out the same way. The moment we walked through the door, Veronica became the main event. Aunts and uncles circled around her, showering her with compliments. "Look at that hair! She's so tall now. What a beauty." I would get the polite leftovers. "And Daphne, you've grown too," or "You must be keeping up with school." I'd nod, smile, and sit in the background while Veronica soaked in all the attention. It wasn't just about looks, though that was a big part of it. Veronica's every interest was treated like a gift from the heavens. When she joined choir, my parents bought her new dresses for every performance and invited everyone we knew. When she painted something mediocre for art class, they framed it in the living room like it belonged in a gallery. Meanwhile, my achievements barely registered. When I won a writing contest, my mom said, "That's nice, dear," before turning to Veronica to ask about her latest crush. When I was selected for advanced classes, my dad told me, "Don't brag," as though I had stolen attention that wasn't mine to take. The worst part wasn't even the favoritism, it was how natural it seemed to everyone else. Relatives, neighbors, teachers, even strangers played along, as if it were written somewhere that Veronica was the star and I was the shadow. I can still remember standing in photos with her, How my mother would nudge me half a step back so Veronica would be front and center. "It just looks better this way," she'd say, adjusting Veronica's hair, her necklace, her smile, while I stood stiff in the corner. Over time, I started to believe it. I stopped trying to outshine her, stopped fighting for scraps of recognition. I became the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who held the camera while Veronica posed. It was easier to fade into the background than to fight a battle I couldn't win. Veronica was the chosen one, and I was the afterthought. That was the script my family wrote for us, and for years I played my role in silence, even as it hollowed me out inside. Some memories stay with you, not because they're bright or joyful, but because they stack up like bricks, building a wall you can't ignore. For me, those bricks were made of exclusions, small and sharp, that cut deeper every year. I remember my 12th birthday. Veronica got a brand new bicycle the same week, and when my birthday cake was placed in front of me, all the attention drifted to her. "Show everyone how fast you can ride it," my dad encouraged, and before I even blew out my candles, the entire family was outside, clapping for her as she pedaled down the street. My cake sat untouched, the candles burned out on their own, and when we came back inside, no one noticed. It wasn't just birthdays. I worked for weeks on a science project in middle school, staying up late, carefully building my display board, practicing my presentation. When I came home with a ribbon, proud and beaming, my mom barely looked up from the phone. "That's good, Daphne," she said, before turning to Veronica to ask how her day had gone. Veronica had joined the cheer team, and that, apparently, was more worth celebrating than my win. The nicknames were another cut, always disguised as jokes. Daydream Daphne, they'd call me when I spoke quietly, as if being thoughtful was something to mock. Big Daph, whispered at the dinner table when I reached for seconds. My sister laughed the loudest at that one, smirking while my parents chuckled. "It's just teasing," they'd say if I protested. But I knew it wasn't teasing. It was erasure wrapped in cruelty. Family dinners became rituals of humiliation. Jokes made at my expense were the main course, laughter the dessert. If I spoke up, my words were drowned out by louder voices. If I stayed silent, I was accused of being moody. I learned to swallow my pride along with my food, pushing down the ache of being invisible while pretending I was fine. Even milestones that should have been undeniable were brushed aside. When I got accepted into a competitive program in high school, I thought for once they'd see me. Instead, the conversation shifted to Veronica's upcoming dance recital. "That's amazing, sweetheart," my father said, barely skimming my acceptance letter before tossing it on the counter. "But we need to make sure we get front row tickets for your sister's big night." My achievement dissolved into the background, forgotten before the ink was dry. Each memory by itself might not have been enough to break me, but stacked together, they told the truth. I was never going to be chosen, never going to be centered in their frame. I was there to fill space, to make Veronica's light shine brighter by comparison. And with every forgotten birthday, every dismissed win, every cruel joke, the pattern became impossible to deny. I wasn't just overlooked. I was erased, piece by piece, until the shadow of exclusion felt heavier than I could carry. And still, somehow, I carried it. The night it happened felt ordinary at first. The table was crowded with food, glasses filled, chatter bouncing off the walls. Veronica was in her usual spotlight, telling some story about her latest triumph at work, and everyone leaned in as though her every word was gold. I sat quietly, waiting for a moment to join in, rehearsing small bits of news in my head, about a project I had finished, about the recognition I had finally received at my job. I wanted, just once, to feel like part of the conversation. When there was a pause, I tried. Actually, I had something good happen at work this week too, I began. My voice was soft but steady. My father glanced at me, uninterested. My mother gave a distracted smile, and before I could finish, Veronica cut in with her smirk. She tilted her glass, looked straight at me, and said, "That's why Mom and Dad don't love you." The words dropped like a stone into the room, and for a heartbeat there was silence. Then the laughter erupted, sharper, louder, more merciless than it had ever been before. My father chuckled without even looking at me. My mother covered her mouth like she wanted to seem embarrassed, but her shoulders shook with amusement. Cousins laughed nervously, then joined in fully. The sound filled every corner of the room, until it felt like it was echoing inside my chest. I tried to smile, but it came out twisted, brittle. My fork felt heavy in my hand, and I forced myself to look down at my plate instead of at their faces. I wanted to believe someone would stop it. I wanted to believe someone would say, "That's not funny," or "Don't say that to your sister." But no one did. They laughed as though Veronica had said something clever, as though my pain was the price of their entertainment. The sting wasn't just in the words. It was in the way they all looked so comfortable laughing at me. It was in the way my mother's eyes flicked to me without guilt. In the way my father didn't even acknowledge me. In the way Veronica leaned back, triumphant, like she had won something. And in a way, she had. She had proven, once again, that the script was hers. She was the star, I was the punchline. But as I sat there, heat rising in my cheeks, something inside me shifted. It was as if all the years of small exclusions, cruel nicknames, forgotten birthdays, and ignored achievements piled up and cracked open at once. I realized in that moment that nothing I did would ever be enough. I could win awards, earn promotions, bend myself into something unrecognizable, and it would never matter. They had written me out of their story a long time ago. That night, surrounded by their laughter, I understood the truth. I would never be wanted in their script. I wasn't a daughter to be loved or a sister to be celebrated. To them, I was a character whose only purpose was to be erased. And for the first time, I began to wonder if I could write a story of my own instead. I didn't storm out that night. I didn't throw my napkin down or scream at them for their cruelty, even though every nerve in my body burned to do it. Instead, I stayed until the end of dinner, my face fixed in a mask that looked calm but felt like it was cracking underneath. They laughed, they talked, they passed desserts around the table, while I sat in silence, barely tasting a single bite. To them, the night carried on as if nothing had happened. To me, it was the end of something I'd been clinging to for years. When it was finally time to leave, I hugged no one. I mumbled polite goodbyes, grabbed my coat, and walked out the door into the cool night air. The laughter followed me down the steps, muffled but still sharp in my ears, a reminder of what I was leaving behind. I didn't slam the door, didn't make a scene. I simply walked away, and for the first time, I didn't look back. On the drive home, the silence inside the car was deafening, but it felt different than the silence at the dinner table. This silence wasn't empty. It was full. Full of realization. Full of resolve. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and thought about all the years I had spent fighting for scraps of affection, begging for a place in their world, believing that if I just tried harder, they would let me in. But the truth was right in front of me now. They thrived on my pain. My humiliation was their entertainment, my invisibility their comfort. And I was done being part of it. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't cry the way I thought I would. Instead, I sat on my bed in the dark, listening to the hum of the city outside, and felt a strange kind of calm. I realized that walking away didn't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the strongest decision is the quietest one, the choice to stop showing up to play the part they've written for you. In the days that followed, I didn't answer their calls. I didn't reply to texts asking why I hadn't been around. I didn't explain myself or try to make them see the damage they had done. I simply stepped back, letting the distance grow wider with every passing day. And though the absence stung at first, I began to notice something else. The air felt lighter. My shoulders felt freer. The constant ache of not being enough began to loosen its grip on me. It wasn't easy. Silence can be lonely. There were moments when I questioned if I had made the right choice. Moments when the pull of wanting their approval almost dragged me back. But every time I remembered that smirk, that laughter, I reminded myself why I left. I wasn't walking away because I was weak. I was walking away because I was finally strong enough to stop letting them define me. No scene, no shouting, just silence. And in that silence, I began to reclaim myself. The first night in my apartment, I sat cross-legged on the floor with a plate of cheap takeout balanced on my knees. I didn't have a couch yet, or even a table. The walls were bare, the carpet thin, and the radiator clanked like it was protesting every breath of heat it gave. Still, it felt more like home than the house I had just left. For once, the air around me didn't sting with judgment. No one was watching what I ate. No one was rolling their eyes at my words. The silence was sharp, but it was mine. Life on my own was nothing close to glamorous. I worked long shifts, taking on extra hours whenever I could just to keep the lights on. My dinners were mostly pasta, rice, or whatever I could find on sale at the grocery store. I stretched leftovers for days, learned how to patch up clothes instead of buying new ones, and kept my heat low in the winter to save on the bill. Some nights, exhaustion made me collapse onto the mattress on the floor, still in my work clothes, shoes kicked halfway across the room. It wasn't easy. It was survival mode, plain and simple. But every morning I woke up, even in that tiny space, I felt lighter. I wasn't walking on eggshells. I wasn't rehearsing every word before I spoke. I wasn't bracing myself for a smirk or a joke at my expense. The freedom was subtle at first, like the way I could eat seconds of dinner without hearing a comment, or the way I could sit in silence without someone labeling me moody. It was in the way I could choose what pictures went on the wall, even if they were just dollar store prints for now. Loneliness did creep in. I'd scroll through my phone, see pictures of my family smiling around the dinner table, and feel the familiar ache of being left out. Sometimes I wondered if I had made a mistake, if maybe I should have stayed quiet and small just to keep a seat in their world. But then I'd remind myself that a seat at their table always came with a price tag, my dignity. And here, in this little apartment, I didn't have to pay that cost anymore. Slowly, I began to shape a routine. I'd cook a real meal once a week, even if it was simple, just to remind myself that I deserved more than instant noodles. I'd light a candle at night, filling the air with vanilla or cinnamon, scents that wrapped around me like a hug. I started going for walks in the evening, letting the fresh air remind me I wasn't stuck in the past anymore. The apartment was small, the hours long, the meals cheap. But it was mine. And with every paycheck, every quiet dinner, every night I closed the door behind me, I felt further away from their cruelty. I wasn't less than here. I wasn't the punchline. I was just me, alone, yes, but free. At first, it was just about survival, paying rent, keeping the lights on, making it through each week without collapsing from exhaustion. But once the dust of starting over began to settle, I realized I had something I'd never truly had before. The freedom to build a life that belonged only to me. No comparisons, no smirks, no shadow hanging over my head. Just me, my choices, and a future that I could shape with my own hands. Work became the first brick in that foundation. I stopped hiding in the background, stopped second-guessing myself the way I always had when my voice was drowned out at the family table. In meetings, I spoke up. At first, my voice shook, but then I began to notice something shocking. People actually listened. My ideas weren't mocked or brushed aside. They were taken seriously. With each project I completed, with each late night I stayed to get things right, I carved out a place for myself that no one could erase. My boss began to trust me with bigger tasks, and coworkers came to me for help. It wasn't about approval anymore. It was about proving to myself that I could stand on my own. Alongside work, I started investing in my health. Not because of the years of cruel comments about my body, but because I wanted to feel strong in a way I never had before. I signed up for a gym membership with the money I used to waste trying to keep up appearances at home. At first, I could barely make it through 10 minutes on the treadmill. But I kept going back. Each drop of sweat felt like I was letting go of something they had piled onto me. Shame, doubt, ridicule. As my body grew stronger, so did my mind. I wasn't chasing their approval anymore. I was reclaiming myself. Friendships, too, began to grow in the spaces that used to be filled with loneliness. People I worked with invited me out, and instead of making excuses, I went. I laughed over cheap pizza in someone's apartment, stayed up too late swapping stories, and slowly realized that not every table was like the one I had grown up around. These people didn't need me to be perfect, didn't mock me for existing. They wanted me there. They celebrated small wins with me, encouraged me when I doubted myself, and filled the gaps that my family had left wide open. Piece by piece, the foundation formed. Work gave me purpose, health gave me strength. Friendships gave me belonging. And for the first time, I stopped asking myself what my family would think, because their opinions no longer shaped my world. They didn't know about the nights I stayed late at the office. They didn't know about the miles I was running or the weights I was lifting. They didn't know about the friends who cheered for me louder than they ever had. Bit by bit, I was building a life, and it was mine. Quiet, steady, beautiful in its own way. A life they knew nothing about. The transformation didn't come in a single moment. It wasn't like I woke up one day and everything had changed. It was gradual, almost invisible at first. Late nights at the office turning into promotions, small steps on the treadmill turning into miles, quiet dinners with friends turning into laughter that echoed louder than I ever thought possible. But over time, the pieces added up until I barely recognized the person staring back at me in the mirror. At work, I started to feel the shift first. I wasn't the timid girl in the corner anymore, waiting for scraps of recognition. I was leading projects, speaking with confidence, and earning respect that wasn't begrudging or conditional. It was real. My boss pulled me aside one day, handed me the paperwork for a promotion, and said, "You've earned this. People trust you." It was the kind of validation I had starved for my entire life. But the difference was, this time, I wasn't chasing it. I had built it myself. My body and mind followed. The gym that once felt intimidating became a second home. Each time I pushed myself a little further, I felt lighter. Not because I was trying to disappear into some version of myself they wanted, but because I was finally shedding the weight of their voices. My jeans fit differently, my reflection looked sharper, but the real change was in my posture. I stood taller. I walked into rooms without shrinking. And I noticed people noticing me, not with smirks or comparisons, but with genuine admiration. Strangers held doors open longer, co-workers complimented my energy, friends told me I glowed. And they were right. I did glow. Not because I had transformed into someone else, but because I was finally living as myself. My laugh, once quiet and careful, became louder, freer. I didn't flinch anymore when people looked my way. I wanted them to see me, because for the first time, I saw myself. My friendships grew deeper too. The people I surrounded myself with weren't placeholders or obligations, they were chosen. We celebrated promotions with late-night champagne, we hiked on weekends, we cried together when life felt heavy. They knew me not as the shadow of my sister or the butt of a family joke, but as Daphne, someone worthy of being loved and celebrated just as I was. The glow-up wasn't just physical, and it wasn't just about success. It was about presence. I was undeniable now, not because I demanded attention, but because I no longer apologized for existing. And when I laughed, it wasn't brittle or forced, like it had been at that family dinner table. It was full, genuine, alive. The girl they once ignored, the one they told didn't belong in the family picture, was gone. In her place was a woman who had built her own frame, one filled with strength, joy, and light. And for the first time in my life, I didn't just take up space. I owned it. It started as whispers, little fragments of conversation I overheard when I wasn't even looking for them. A cousin mentioned at a barbecue that Veronica and her husband had been fighting more than usual. An aunt leaned in at the grocery store, lowering her voice to say, "You didn't hear this from me, but they're behind on their mortgage." I smiled politely, tucked the words away, and kept walking. For years, I had been force-fed the story of Veronica's perfect life, every detail polished and paraded like a crown jewel. Hearing the cracks now felt almost unreal. The pieces came together slowly. At a friend's wedding, someone told me Veronica's husband had shown up late to family gatherings and left early, citing work emergencies no one quite believed. At church, I caught wind of neighbors gossiping about Veronica's shopping sprees, expensive clothes, extravagant trips, all while bills at home were stacking up. The woman who had once been praised for her poise and charm was suddenly the subject of murmurs about irresponsibility and arrogance. Her career, too, wasn't as untouchable as everyone claimed. She had always been framed as the golden professional, the one destined for success. But I heard from an old classmate who worked near her office that Veronica wasn't delivering on her projects. Deadlines missed, co-workers frustrated, bosses unimpressed. She was good at talking herself up, but the results didn't match the story anymore. And in the real world, charm only carried you so far. It was strange to hear it all, because for so long, I had been told she was flawless. My parents made her sound like she was the definition of success, like I was wasting my time even trying to measure up. And yet, the truth was unraveling in hushed tones around me. Her perfect marriage was strained, her finances shaky, her career unsteady. The golden child's shine was dimming, and everyone could see it, even if they pretended not to. What struck me most wasn't just her cracks, but the way my parents scrambled to hide them. They rushed to her defense, covering bills, making excuses, insisting she was just going through a tough time. It was the same script they had always used, protecting her image at any cost. But this time, the cracks were too wide to patch over. The illusion wasn't holding. I didn't feel glee, not exactly. It wasn't joy to watch someone else stumble. But there was a strange clarity in it, a sense of vindication. For years, I had been cast as the disappointment, the one not worth celebrating, while Veronica basked in unearned adoration. Seeing the truth revealed what I had always known deep down. Their pedestal was never real. It was built on favoritism, not substance. And maybe that was the difference between us. While I had been forced to build myself piece by piece, Veronica had relied on the illusion of perfection. Now that it was cracking, she didn't know how to stand on her own. I did. And for the first time, I realized her shine had only ever seemed so bright because they worked so hard to keep me in the dark. The first call came from my mother. I almost didn't answer when I saw her name flash across my phone. For months, there had been nothing but silence, the same silence I had grown used to all my life. But something in me was curious, so I picked up. Her voice was unusually sweet, dripping with warmth I had never known from her before. "Daphne, honey, it's been too long. How are you doing? We've missed you." The words felt rehearsed, like lines from a play she hadn't bothered practicing until now. At first, I thought maybe she had finally realized what she had done, that perhaps she was calling to apologize for the years of cruelty, for the dinner where Veronica smirked and the family laughed while I sat frozen. But as the conversation went on, the mask slipped. She started talking about hard times, about how the bills had piled up, about how your father isn't as strong as he used to be. Then she added, almost too casually, "I know you've been doing well for yourself. Maybe you could help us out, just this once." I didn't answer right away. I could feel the words pressing against my throat, but instead I let the silence hang. That silence made her rush to fill it. "You know, family takes care of family. We've always been there for you, Daphne." That was the lie that almost made me laugh. Always been there for me? Where were they when I cried alone in my room after another night of their jokes? Where were they when Veronica mocked me and they joined in? A few days later, my father called. His tone was more direct, less sugar-coated. "Look, Daphne," he said, "your sister and Mark are having a rough patch. There's some financial strain, and you've got connections, right? Maybe you could pull some strings for her? You're doing well now. You could make things easier for the family." It wasn't a request. It was an expectation, the same kind they had always carried, that I would bend, give, serve, while they took and took. Even Veronica reached out, her voice still dripping with superiority, even as she tried to mask it. "Hey, Daph," she said, like we were close. "Listen, I know we've had our differences, but things are complicated right now. You're in a good position to help, and I figured, since you're my sister, you'd want to." She couldn't even say the words without making it sound like charity work on my part. The desperation was there, but so was the arrogance. It was almost laughable. For years I had been invisible to them, erased from their picture. Now, suddenly, I was valuable, because I had something they needed. Their warmth wasn't love. It wasn't care. It was survival. And in their eyes, I was the solution. But what they didn't understand was that I wasn't the same Daphne who once begged for their affection. I didn't need their approval, and I certainly didn't owe them my success. They had laughed at me, erased me, dismissed me. And now they were calling, but for the first time in my life, I held the power. When the next call came, I didn't hesitate. I answered, but this time I was ready. My mother's voice rushed through the line with syrupy sweetness, the same fake warmth she'd tried before. "Daphne, sweetheart, we just want to talk. You've been so distant, and we don't want to lose you. Your family." Her words didn't sting the way they used to. Instead, they rolled off me like water on glass. I let her ramble for a minute before cutting in, my voice steady. "You want to talk now because you need me. Don't pretend this is about family." There was silence on her end, the kind of silence that comes when someone has been caught. Then my father's voice appeared in the background, muttering that I was being unreasonable. I took a deep breath and for the first time in my life, I didn't swallow my truth. I spoke it. "You laughed," I said, my voice sharper now. "When Veronica smirked across the table and said Mom and Dad don't love me, you sat there, all of you, and you laughed." My words hung heavy. Do you know what that felt like? To sit there, waiting for someone to defend me, to say, "That's not true"? But no one did. You let it stand, you made it real. I could hear my mother inhale sharply, as if she wanted to argue, but I didn't give her the chance. You erased me with your silence, with your favoritism, with every cruel joke that was made at my expense. You erased me from the family picture long before you ever said the words out loud. And now that the perfect daughter's life isn't so perfect anymore, suddenly I'm worth calling? Suddenly I'm family again? Veronica's voice broke through then, sharp and defensive. "That's not fair, Daphne. You're twisting everything. We were just joking that night." "Joking?" I interrupted, my calmness slicing sharper than anger ever could. "A joke is funny for everyone, not just the people laughing at someone else's pain. You weren't joking. You were showing me exactly where I stood with all of you. Nowhere." The line went quiet again. I let the silence sit, let them stew in it. Then I delivered the truth I had carried for so long, the truth they never expected to hear from the girl they had treated as a shadow. "Look at me now," I said. My voice didn't shake, not once. "I built a life without you. I have friends who love me, a career I'm proud of, a home where I belong. You once laughed when you said Mom and Dad don't love me. And maybe you were right. Maybe you never did. But I learned something you never could. I don't need your love to thrive. I don't need your approval to be whole. And I will never again be your scapegoat or your savior." With that, I ended the call. My hands didn't tremble. My heart didn't race. For the first time in my life, the truth had set me free. In the days after that call, I felt something I had never felt before. Peace. Not the fragile, fleeting kind that came from pretending everything was fine, but the steady kind that grows when you finally stop fighting for a seat at the wrong table. For so long, I thought love had to come from the people who raised me, that family meant blood, even if it bled me dry. But walking away, standing firm, telling them the truth, it showed me that family isn't about who shares your last name. It's about who shows up, who sees you, who stays. My circle was smaller than the one I was born into, but it was real. The friends who knocked on my door with takeout after a long day, who toasted to my promotions louder than my parents ever clapped. The co-workers who encouraged me when I doubted myself, who told me I deserved the success I had earned. The neighbors who smiled and waved, who learned my name without comparing me to anyone else. They weren't bound to me by blood, but by choice. And every single day, they chose me. That mattered more than any scripted family photo ever could. I stopped looking at the pictures my parents and Veronica posted online. The polished smiles, the curated captions, the illusion of a family united. It didn't sting anymore. Because I knew the truth behind it. The cracks were there, no matter how hard they tried to hide them. And I no longer needed to measure myself against an illusion. My life, though less flashy, was authentic. And authenticity shines brighter than any facade. I filled my own walls with pictures, not of forced smiles, but of real laughter. Photos from trips with friends, from birthdays where I was celebrated, from quiet nights cooking dinner and clinking glasses just because we could. Each frame reminded me that I wasn't erased. I was here, living fully, surrounded by people who loved me not in spite of who I was, but because of it. Sometimes I still think about that night at the dinner table, about the way Veronica smirked and the room exploded with laughter. For a long time, that memory haunted me. but now it fuels me. Because the girl they mocked for being unwanted grew into a woman who created her own place, her own worth, her own definition of family. I don't hate them. I don't even wish for revenge anymore. What I feel is distance, clarity, and freedom. They can keep their smirks, their shallow affection, their desperate attempts to hold together a picture-perfect frame. I've built something far better, something they can't touch. They thought their laughter would break me, but it only pushed me to rise higher than they ever imagined. They laughed at my pain, I laughed at my future, and my future won. Did you enjoy the story? If so, please let me know in the comments. Also, subscribe to support us. Thanks for watching.